Good morning and welcome to our college football playoff poll reaction. The College Football Playoff Committee revealed its rankings last night. We are here to react to them. Joining us is our good friend Trey Wallace of Outkick, along with my co-host Chase Robinson. Trey, you are a good friend of mine. You are a good friend of the show. Thank you for joining us on what I know is a super busy time for you.
Yeah, it's not a lot going on, right? So
Not at all.
We're good. There's nothing happening in college football. Everybody can just put down their swords and focus on basketball. So that's it.
Well, in all seriousness, your reaction to the playoff committee and what it did last night with its rankings.
Yeah, I think that. Look, obviously, the answers that we're getting from Ward Manuel are not cutting it. I think really how to break it down is they're all over the place. We're talking about strength of schedule in one stance, and then we're talking about the eye test, and then we're talking about we're hitting the reset button every single weekend. And to me, it just feels like the CFP committee is running off name value, I think. And when we look at these schedules, man, when we look at who these teams have played, you can't tell me that a Penn State team, with a loss to Ohio State at home, and what's their biggest win at USC this year? Washington, and even Indiana. And I like the Indiana story. Don't get me wrong. I love Kirk Cignetti. I do. I think he's a fantastic football coach. But when I look at it, they got one win against a team with a winning record this season. And you want to tell me if they lose on Saturday to Ohio State that they should still be in the college football playoff? No. And I'm not talking about, a field goal at the end of the game, Chris. I'm talking about if they go up there and they get beat by 14 points or something like that, they should be eliminated. And I think that you slip somebody else in. There's a lot we're going to discuss. I just find it fascinating how they're looking at some of these teams.
Chase?
Yeah, the biggest problem I have, I feel like, is when you look at fact and opinion, and I feel like they are going completely opinion on this college football playoff rankings, and there's no fact, nothing factual to how they're ranking these teams. Throw strength of schedule out the window. Let's just look at what their record is, and let's put them in there. So I feel like that's the biggest problem I have is I feel like, one, they're not basing anything off strength of schedule, and it's just a bunch of people opinions, and they're just throwing it in there, and there's nothing factual to what they're doing.
Yeah, it's clear to me that strength of schedule does not matter. I also think, and look, I'm going to pick on the committee here for a minute, but I don't know why we continually have these guys that are working at schools making these decisions. I mean, you've got the head of the committee is the AD at a Big Ten school. Just so happens last week, the poll is very heavily skewed towards the Big Ten. And look, I honestly think they got the right 12 teams. I've done my own homework on this. I put together a lot of research. I don't have a problem with the 12 teams. And I don't even have a problem with people switching lanes every now and then. Like, sometimes a record may be, I think BYU is getting a little bit undersold, to be honest. I know that's probably not super popular in SEC country. I also think South Carolina should be getting more play as an aside than it is. But I get it. Sometimes, one criteria for one school may work and you cite another one for another one. But the gaps in logic and the fact that we are letting guys employed at major conferences make these can you not find competent people to make these decisions outside of athletic directors? I mean, that's just to me, whether your process is good or it's not, you open yourself up to whatever, and then when your logic and reasoning isn't good, it just makes the problem worse.
Look, we had Ward Manuel talking about Indiana's win over Michigan was a big win. This is not 2023 Michigan. I'm sorry. man. This is not a good football team. In Nebraska, not a good football team. I mean, they got 2 chances to make a bowl game here down the stretch. I mean, so when you look at it right now, and I don't mean that as a shot to Indiana. I mean that in the explanations that we are getting from the committee. And the guy that is giving the explanations is Ward Manuel. And so if you're going to play that game and you're going to have him talk about strength of schedule, and you're going to have him talk about, okay, because he pretty much blatantly said last night in his own type of words, well, we don't care what happened in September. Like, we're good. Like, if you're in the running here, like, we're not worried about September. It's all good. We're worried about what's in front of you. And then, Alabama moves up by beating Mercer. And, I can go back and forth to the Miami argument, and that's fine. But at the same time here, we're setting a precedent. It's like, does the Ole Miss loss to Kentucky not count anymore? Are we looking at, and here's another great example, ESPN, God bless them, man. They had the college football playoff rights. And last night they said in a graphic that Texas's big wins were Vanderbilt and Arkansas. Okay, I'm not going to hate on the Vanderbilt thing because at the time Vanderbilt was running hot. But the Arkansas thing, it's like, wait a minute. You're calling the Tennessee loss at Arkansas a bad loss, which came down to pretty much the final play of the game, but you're saying the Texas win at Arkansas is a big win. Where are we going with this? It makes zero sense. So I think that's where they've caught themselves, and the last 2 weeks are going to be fascinating. 3 weeks.
Yeah, Trey, I want to get your thoughts because last week we did this. We talked a lot about Tennessee, and I want to get your thoughts on the Vols again this week. They're ranked number 11. They are outside of the bracket. What do you see as Tennessee's path to be in the playoff bracket? I mean, is it winning the next 2 games? Who needs to fall? Like, how can the Tennessee Volunteers get themselves in the playoff bracket?
Beat UTEP by 40 some odd points on Saturday. Don't let that hold you. Don't let it hold him against. So what I'm saying, don't go out and win 35-7. Like, beat up on UTEP on Saturday, and obviously go beat Vanderbilt. You don't have to beat Vanderbilt by 21 points or 14 points. Just go beat Vanderbilt. We've seen what other schools have done. We saw Texas escape Nashville. So if we want to make that argument, we can make that argument about playing at Vanderbilt. I think at the end of the day, they need some help, man. Like they if they want to get in this weekend, have Billy Napier and the resurrection of Florida football over the last 4 weeks knock off Ole Miss. Like if that right there will get you into the playoffs because it knocks Ole Miss out of the way. And then you can figure out what else to do with, the remaining SEC teams. But I think at the end of the day, I think taking away from like what the SEC is doing, I think when you look at it, Indiana needs to lose this weekend. I think that when you look at the other at-large schools, I think it would probably be nice for them if BYU catches a loss, just completely gets them out of the way. And then at the same time, the Colorado-Boise State thing is very interesting to me because I think Colorado is going to win the Big 12 right now. I think they are playing really good on offense. I think the defense is playing well enough. And BYU struggled before losing to Kansas. Like I was waiting for them to lose a game. So at the end of the day, I think if Texas A&M beats Texas in College Station, I think Tennessee slides right in there because what is the Longhorns' biggest win of the year? Vanderbilt.
At Michigan.
But I don't trust the at Michigan thing anymore. Like that's fine. You go on the road, that's cool. I mean, Alabama beat the hell out of Wisconsin. Okay, that's fine. Somehow Alabama, and I'm not going to get in the weeds about this part, but Alabama stayed in front of Tennessee. Okay, well, Tennessee went on the road and lost to Georgia. I look at that last touchdown as a garbage time touchdown, even though the drive was fantastic, by the way. The 8-minute drive to put it away was great by Georgia. I still look at it, Chase, as in Tennessee's offense has not lived up to the billing this year. But I've always said, I think since week 3 of this, and we've all been talking as well too, Tennessee's talking point this year is how good their defense is. And I look at that first half against Georgia. Sure, they left the middle of the field open, tight end, had a big day. I get that part of it. But at the same time, again, this is where I go back on Ward Manuel's comments, man. It's like, are we basing this off this one game here? Is that why, they drop behind? And so I don't know, man. I think that there are a couple different scenarios, and I'll leave it at this with Tennessee. You want to be in the playoffs, have Army beat Notre Dame this weekend, get them out of the way. I'm so sick and tired of talking about Notre Dame. Somehow they are ranked where they are with a loss to Northern Illinois, and I look at the remaining of their schedule, and then the other big one is, have USC, knock off the Irish, to end the regular season. So there's a lot of different pathways for Tennessee to still get in.
Trey, the seeding, again, is where I've got the issue. Apologies earlier. I guess my mic wasn't on. But I'm going to make a point, and this is not a trick question. Just walk through this with me. I'm going to give you top 5 wins for each of these. I'll start with Notre Dame. In fact, I'll give you the 9 wins. At A&M for Notre Dame, at A&M, Louisville, Georgia Tech, nice wins. Then we go Navy, Virginia, Miami, Ohio, Florida State, all at home, at Purdue, Stanford. That's Notre Dame's wins. We'll get to the losses in a second. Here's what you've got if you are Alabama. Georgia, at LSU, South Carolina, at Wisconsin, Missouri, Western Kentucky, South Florida, and also Mercer. Whose wins would you rather have? Not a trick question. Okay, I think it's such an obvious we don't have to answer. Let's go to Georgia.
Right.
At Texas, Tennessee, Clemson in Atlanta, Florida in Jacksonville, Auburn at Kentucky, Mississippi State, Tennessee Tech. Whose wins would you rather have? Okay, now let's go to losses.
Yes.
Would you rather lose to Northern Illinois at home, or would you rather lose at Alabama, and would you rather lose at Ole Miss? That's what Georgia's done. Or would you rather lose, if you're Alabama, at Tennessee, at Vandy? Whose wins are better? In each case, whose losses are worse? We get to the playoff bracket. Notre Dame 8, Alabama 9, Georgia 10. And right now, I guess, who cares? Why does that matter? I get it. But why? Here's the implication. If you end the season today, you're having Alabama playing at Notre Dame?
Yeah.
You're having Georgia play at Penn State? Yeah. I mean, and we could do the same thing with Penn State. Tell me why. How do you arrive at that point?
I can't find a reason. I sat there and watched Penn State play Ohio State, and they scored 6 points after the first quarter. And it's not as if Ohio State is some world beater this year. They are good. Don't get me wrong, and they could win a national championship, but they're not a world beater. Okay, and I think that's one of the best parts about this, Chase and Chris, is that even Oregon has problems. So I look at this as there are a number of teams that can win this whole thing. But I think with the schedule and the way, and I just can't, I remember what I was doing when I saw Notre Dame lose to North Illinois. This, the committee in that room, sit there, oh, we don't remember that. We're good. This is the same Northern Illinois team that followed the CFP show last night and got trounced up by Miami of Ohio. So it's and the Penn State thing is, their biggest win, what is a whiteout game against Washington at night. It just, we're getting down to it. And I think, Oregon's already clinched a Big Ten spot, Chase, in the title game. And I'm fascinated over the next 2 weeks to see how this part plays out. But, they decided to go Big Ten heavy in the top 5 this year in the playoffs. And that's their prerogative. That's fine. But, you give Georgia, Alabama, and Ole Miss. I'll give Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas. Okay. Give them the Big Ten schedule. Undefeated right now. Yeah. I mean, one loss. I mean, I just think that it's so far ahead in what they're doing, and their explanations are just, there was one last night, and I'm not trying to go long here with the answer, but there was one last night, and I'm going to bring it up real quick. where they contradicted themselves when they came to Tennessee. Ward Manuel did. Last week, he said Tennessee's offense has not been consistent. They haven't played well in the second half. Not a good offensive team. Then last night, he comes out and says, well, it's really splitting hairs. And he was talking about how to rank the 4 SEC teams. And he says, they have a great offense and a great defense, and they play hard. The committee just had a hard time. You're talking about really 4 really good teams when you look at Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and Tennessee. Wait a minute. So Tennessee's offense was not good last week, but now all of a sudden they are good this week. And by the way, they got a good defense. It's like these guys are just running week to week, and I don't think they know what the hell they're talking about in some of these cases.
Trey, it's like watching a White House press secretary whose president is underwater trying to answer a press conference. Like the answers either aren't defensible or they're not researched at all. I'm going to give you another one because this is the one I think people should be talking about more.
Okay.
Well, or maybe not more, but I think this at least should be on the discussion. This is a non-SEC one. Okay. BYU has lost. Let's start with the bad. Lost to Kansas, which, by the way, is not an awful loss, although it was at home. Boise State has lost at Oregon. Obviously, if you're going to have a loss, you'd rather lose to Oregon than Kansas. I will concede that. But wins. Explain to me how BYU gets jumped by Boise. Here's what BYU has done is won at SMU, beaten Kansas State, won at UCF, at Baylor, won at Utah, beat Oklahoma State, beat Arizona, won at Wyoming. That's a lot of really quality wins, especially winning in SMU. By the way, the only team to win over SMU this year. This is what Boise has done. And by the way, and I got love for the Mountain West. I've had a nephew who has played football at Wyoming and a niece who's played basketball at Colorado State. So I'm not hating on the Mountain West, but the facts are what they are. Here's what Boise State's done. Won at UNLV, beat Washington State. Nice wins. Won at Georgia Southern, at San Jose State, at Hawaii, Nevada, Oregon State, Utah State, Portland State. Now you tell me how you put those teams on a scale based on resume, and Boise State comes out ahead of BYU. You know, and by the way, you look at the power rankings and computers, Boise State and BYU are ranked about the same. So to me, if it's a question of strength of the teams are pretty even, the resume to me is pretty loud in BYU's favor. That's another one where I just don't. It feels like they were not prepared with any kind of research or answers.
I think, Chase, I don't know how you feel about this, but Boise State is just, okay, get through this regular season and then give us the opportunity to play Colorado State, who, by the way, is undefeated in the Mountain West Conference. Like, that's what I think Boise State is praying for when it comes to this. Because if they win the Mountain West by beating Colorado State, who's undefeated in the conference right now, and I get who they've played, I've seen their schedule, but look at Indiana. It's good to have an undefeated, conference record. I know what happened in the regular season, but at the end of the day, I think that's what Boise would be hanging their hat on, is like, okay, we did this to finish the season, so keep us in contention for, either that 12th, spot, however you want to put it, the 4th and the at large, or the 12th. So, I mean, like, that's what they have to be praying for, right? I mean, that's it.
Yeah, it is. Like, I feel like that's how they get in, and that's what's. Yeah, it's just strange how we're even having the conversation, especially around that. But yeah, I think that is the way they get in.
Because one loss, the at large. Okay, there's only be one at large. So there needs to be only one at large in the CFP, and that's fine. Okay, if they want to do that, that's fine. We can see if some miracle happens. Okay, so be it. But I think what happened is, I think the Big 12, which I've called the craziest conference this season, ACC probably comes in second. SEC is what it is. The Big 12, once Iowa State lost that game, once Kansas State lost 2 in a row, once BYU finally dropped a game, then all of a sudden Colorado comes back from the dead. I mean, I was at that game in Nebraska. I was like, okay, this Colorado team's done. They might get to a bowl game, and they proved me wrong. So I think the Big 12 is really throwing a wrinkle into this whole situation because a lot of folks just have BYU clocked in. Okay, well, now if Colorado goes on the run here, Okay, who are you going to put at that 4th spot? You know what I mean? When it comes to, is it going to be Boise or is it going to be Colorado? And then we give Colorado in, at the 12 spot as the at large, even though they won the Big 12. So I think that it gets complicated in that standpoint, but there's your 2 teams. So it's Big 12 at large. ACC should only get 1 team in. If SMU beats Miami, you're done. Bye-bye. See you later. Don't want to have an argument with you. Don't want to talk about you any longer. If Miami beats SMU, there's a reason why the committee has SMU ranked where they are. They're done. So the ACC team's ACC is only going to get 1 team in. So now it just depends on how you decipher the rest of these spots, and I think that's when the SEC Big Ten argument, and they're going to push around their weight, guys. We know that. Why do you think they had that meeting in Nashville? I think it was a month ago. I was there. It wasn't just about scheduling and whatnot. It was also to show, hey, we're together on this. Don't screw us over here. Or we'll go do something that you don't like. I just think there's a lot to it.
Well, they've completely greased the skids for the Big Ten right now, because if the season ends today, and again, a lot can change, but you've got Georgia playing at Penn State, Ole Miss playing at Indiana, BYU playing at Ohio State, and then, by the way, Alabama goes on the road to Notre Dame. So Ohio State also not only gets BYU first round, it also matches up the 5-12 now with Boise in the second round. So I think Ohio State gets a pretty clean path to the semifinals just based on that.
If they lose to Indiana, let's just say Indiana comes in there and runs. And by the way, I'm just going to throw this out there. Ohio State lost their starting center yesterday, Seth McLaughlin, to a torn Achilles. So that Ohio State offensive line now is down 2 starters over the last month. Indiana goes into Ohio State and beats them up. And I know what Ohio State's other loss was to Oregon. I get that on the road. You got to start having a conversation now. Okay, look at the strength of schedule. Look at Indiana. I get it. But does Ohio State deserve to be in the college football playoff if they're not fighting for a Big Ten championship and playing for one? And because what's going to happen is whoever the loser of that game, and I would understand the Penn State argument. Ohio State went to Penn State and won, and they should be. But wait a minute, you just lost to an Indiana team, that we're talking about has what, the 101st strength of schedule in the country and hasn't played anybody yet, but all of a sudden they go in there and they run rush shot over the Buckeyes. I'm just saying, like, now that's going to pop up because the committee is like, well, damn, we really don't want to not have Ohio State in the CFP. I mean, it's ratings galore, but you don't you have to have a conversation? You got a 2-loss Ohio State team. Okay. Is a 2-loss Ohio State in the same conversation, Chris and Chase, as Alabama, Ole Miss?
Well, Trey, I think that's the truth serum that you're rooting for, because right now the difference between 1 loss and 2 losses is huge. It seems like everybody just kind of gets 1 loss to play with, but you lose that second one, that's when you drop to the very edge. And see, to me, if Ohio State loses that second one, the test to me is if you're going to be consistent, you drop them to 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that territory. If you drop Ohio State to, say, 8 after that, then it's clear that you have stacked the deck in the favor of one conference, which I think it's already clear. But anyway.
Right. But I mean, I'm looking at the schedule right now, and okay, Alabama, just looking at the 12, Alabama's going to go on the road to Oklahoma this weekend. I think that should be a win. We've seen crazy things in the SEC. I agree with that. It's fine, whatever. But I don't think Oklahoma is going to win that football game. But then you look at it, Wake Forest is going to play at Miami. Okay, there's a reason why Miami's favored by 24. The Ole Miss Florida game is interesting to me. Like I said earlier, SMU Virginia. I think that game is kind of interesting in a way. Virginia has shown signs of life at times this year, but then you look at it, the only other game there's 2 games that stand out besides what we've talked about earlier is Penn State at Minnesota, because Minnesota has beaten Penn State at home in the last 4 years. I think that was an interesting one to watch. Not saying Minnesota's going to win. And then does BYU and Arizona State, how does that play out? Because that's going to factor into the Big 12 for even Arizona State's purposes. And then I'll just throw, the other one at you. Colorado and Kansas. Kansas coming off 2 big wins. Okay, well, what did they knock off Colorado? Okay, the Big 12's all in a mess again. And you got to figure out who's going to be your automatic qualifier. And then, like I said earlier, it's the last one. Yankee Stadium on Saturday. By the way, Notre Dame has not played a road game since September. A true road game since September. And they're going to play Army on Saturday. And if we get chaos, that's where I think the committee is going to have to look at their strength of schedule and going to have to look at all this BS they've been throwing out for the last 3 weeks and kind of recalibrate their message. Because then you would get an Army team. Hello, by the way, that's another at-large squad who's going to play in the AAC championship. And then, by the way, they're going to come back and play the next week in the regular season finale against Navy. So I'm just saying that there's a bunch of different scenarios that could play out here. But this whole, I think that what Ward Manuel has done is set up the Big Ten for success. And I'm not trying to say he's doing it on purpose, but I'm saying his messaging has made fans question.
Trey, it has the appearance that they had the answers and then they just backfitted them with some explanations. It doesn't feel like they arrived out of logic and then said this is the conclusion we arrived at. That's how it feels to me.
I want to get your thoughts, Trey, on Texas because they do have a big one with A&M. Next week they get Kentucky this week, I believe. Yeah, Kentucky this week, A&M the following week. Let's say they do end up with 2 losses. If they lose to A&M, where would Texas be at? Would Georgia go over Texas? Like, what do you do with Texas? Because then they're, again, like you mentioned, the graphic, Vanderbilt and Arkansas would be still their best wins.
I think the Texas situation is tricky. You got to take care of Kentucky this weekend. I don't think it matters how many points. I mean, I think Texas wins by 10 points or more. But then, you go on the road and you lose in College Station. I hate the term playoff eliminator and all that stuff because, by the way, the SEC tiebreaker scenario for the championship game is still kind of out there right now. So we don't know who's going to play for a title. And I think that when you look at Texas, and again, I go back to that stupid graphic by ESPN last night where they said Arkansas was a big win. But Tennessee's was a bad loss. It's if you lose that game, is the elimination status, does that go towards, that rivalry? I think so, because you look at A&M and you look at their schedule and you look at Texas and you look at Texas' schedule, we would end the regular season. As crazy as it sounds, it's true. The biggest win Texas would have was the one that Chris Lee and I were at, and that was in Nashville against Vanderbilt. And how can you really put that up against others? Let's just say, Tennessee. Tennessee beat Alabama. And so how are you going to put that in a category of, okay, this team is better than this one, so we're going to decipher it in this way because Texas is that name. Texas has been Quinn Ewers all season long. Texas has been at the top of the, they lost to Georgia and then they make their way back into the conversation. What I'm getting here is that if we're going off what Ward Manuel has been saying, they're past the Georgia loss. They're past the Georgia loss. They want to see what Texas done from them. So if they lose to A&M, now your argument is who's your 4 out of the SEC? Ole Miss, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee. I think that's it, because you can't tell me, even though Tennessee's offense has not been what it's supposed to be, in my opinion, you still, if you match schedules up, you're getting a tough end of the draw here. So I just think that if they lose, they should be out. If they lose a close one by 3, let all hell break loose and figure out what the committee is going to do, because I don't know. So I just, whatever. There have been times that I think Texas is not a top 5 team in the country. But I think going into College Station, they could put it all to bed, Chase. Going to College Station in front of 110,000 people with the renewal of that rivalry and get out of there with a win. Yeah, you're good. You're in. Texas A&M, you can stop that conversation now.
Here's the big question to me. At this point, like, you're getting, 5 conference champions in, right? So it's really and how the seeding is going to go. We have a pretty decent idea depending on what they do with Boise State.
Yeah.
But here's my question. Like, how many teams are really fighting for those other 7 spots? Like, does a 2-loss Clemson really have a shot? Does a 3-loss South Carolina really have a shot? A&M's back there at 15, but like, would a loss in the SEC title game get SMU? I mean, get A&M kicked out? I mean, that's what I'm kind of interested in. Like, how many teams really are at play for those other 7 spots?
By the way, Chase and Chris, congratulations to Missouri for having some kind of dirt on the CFP committee, whether it is dirty photos or emails or something that's going on. The fact that they are still ranked, there is one reason for it, because it props other teams up in the SEC. Yeah. I'm sorry. You had Brady Cook. You lost in South Carolina. I look at their biggest win recently is against Oklahoma. I mean, like, come on, man. Like, what are we doing with Missouri? Why the hell would they still be ranked? I don't get the infatuation. And I just look at the conference as a whole, and I look at South Carolina and I think, man, if they wouldn't have caught that 3rd loss, they would clearly be in the conversation for the college football. And then the SEC would have 5 or 6 teams. They got to figure out who would get in. That's where because South Carolina is playing some damn good football. And I think at the same time, man, Shane Beamer, there's something about what he's doing with the Gamecocks, and I feel like they would be, in that conversation. But to be where they are right now, that is helping other teams out. And it's because, by the way, it's because South Carolina has proved it on the field. It's not because they're hanging around to help other teams out, Chase, like Missouri. South Carolina's actually done it on the field. And they should have beaten Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. I get it, but Lenore Sellers was probably playing at 50% in that game. So I don't know. Crazy how we get to this point. And I think the answers over the next 2 weeks. I think the biggest thing will be heading into championship weekend. What do we see on that Tuesday night heading into championship weekend, which will start, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, on that Friday with Mountain West Pac-12, not Pac-12. I don't know why I just said Pac-12. Mountain West, and then you will have, doesn't the ACC – I'm trying to remember if all 3 – because usually, we could rely on the Pac-12 to play that Friday night championship game. So I'm trying to remember who would play out. But whatever. You're going to get games on Friday and Saturday. And I think that last little inclination of what we get on that Tuesday before championship weekend is going to set it up, because, it's the Lane Kiffin argument. And I don't blame Lane Kiffin for saying this. Should you be penalized for going to play in the SEC title game or whatever title game? And you catch a loss by 3 to 7 to 10 points or something like that, it's a close game, but you're eliminated from contention. And that is a topic, guys. Like, I have spoken to a number of college football head coaches over the last 2 weeks about this scenario, and they are absolutely worried about it. They're worried about injuries. They're worried about going out and catching a loss that would hurt them. Hell, they're worried about practice right now. There's a reason why they're not going hard in practice. Point of emphasis last night in Columbus, Ohio, when they lost their starting center to an Achilles injury. I'm just saying everybody's on pins and needles right now, and they don't want to catch an L that would hurt them. And I think that we're getting to a point where even winning a conference championship in Atlanta, for some coaches, they're not going to say it to their players because it means something to win a conference championship to those players. But I promise you, from the conversations I've had in those staff meetings, they would rather not play in Atlanta or Indianapolis or Dallas if they already have a spot in the championship. in the playoffs.
Yeah, which is
Yeah,
crazy. We're even having that conversation based off that conference championships used to be how you got in. It used to be how all of this was decided. It's wild.
But to me, what should matter is like, and I'm not trying to take shots at him, but like, if you put A&M and Alabama on a neutral field right now, Alabama would probably be favored by 10 points. So to me, it depends on who that loss is to. If it's to an A&M, but here's one for you. What happens if it's Texas and Georgia in the championship game, and Georgia wins that one again? Do you just say, if you're the committee, hey, Texas has got 2 losses, they're both to the same team, they just match up poorly with Georgia, let them in? I would be curious to how that would be settled.
It's the last thing Georgia wants.
Well, probably, but
it's the last thing Texas would want. I mean, how do you?
Okay, then what do you do with the 3-loss Georgia? Because then they're like, okay, you lost to Texas, but you also beat Texas at its place.
Can't go head to head with them,
right?
You can't
split.
You're 1-1. You got to put
and the rest of your resume is better,
and that would screw over a team like Tennessee.
Yeah,
like
well, certainly.
That's where your chaos comes in, because what they're really wanting to happen to CFP is get a team like Ole Miss into the SEC championship game and have them lose by 10 points or something like that. And then that gives them a reason to drop them out. That's why Lane Kiffin doesn't want to go. I don't blame Lane, because then you're going to say, okay, well, look at Tennessee's schedule compared to Ole Miss's schedule, and they dropped a game at the end of the season. So it just becomes fascinating to me, and to see who's going to play for a conference title. And we're getting down to it, the way I see it, here we go. Like, this is it. Like the last 2 weekends, who's going to play for an ACC title, who's going to play for a Big 12 title, and who's going to be in the Southeastern Conference Championship in Atlanta. We already know what the Big Ten's doing. And by the way, we're is in the Mountain West, the at-large, I get it. We're all talking about Boise and whatnot. But, the best thing that would happen for some, Colorado State, here's your interesting thing. Colorado State beats Boise State in the Mountain West Championship, and Colorado State does not get into the playoffs because their record, that helps out other teams.
Yeah, because they would let in who at that point, Tulane, maybe
Colorado State into the playoffs.
No, I'm saying that, but because then it becomes another conference champion at another conference. It shifts from Mountain West to another place, right?
Yep, and would that be an Army? So I'm just saying, if they win, I'm just saying there's a lot of different scenarios, and I think the committee has done a very, very bad job at explaining this to the public. And I think there are college coaches right now that are just as confused as we are on this thing. And that's kind of how I'll end it.
By the way, ESPN FPI's got Ole Miss as a 0.6 favorite to win the SEC, which I'm presuming it thinks that the tiebreaker path to get there is not favorable.
No. Nope. Pretty fascinating, huh?
Yeah. Any parting thoughts from you, Chase, and then we'll give Trey the final word. I know Trey told us he had about 30 minutes. He's given us about 39 at this point, which we appreciate. But anyway, I'll give you gentlemen the word on the way out here.
I mean, it's all going to come down to championship weekend, and we just kind of have to wait and see how they. There's a lot of football to be played before then, but I mean that's when we'll, I guess, find out what in the world they're actually going to do, and how they can get themselves, I guess, out of the situation that they've put themselves in the last couple of weeks.
I think that we're looking at this Saturday as an opportunity. Look, we have seen it since week 2 of the season. There has been chaos every single weekend. There has been somebody that has lost a game that wasn't supposed to, that has driven the conversation, whether that was the AP poll earlier in the year before the CFP rankings came out. I think on Saturday, you're going to see, again, something happen that ravages the CFP, makes them come out with some utter stupid comments next Tuesday on how they've ranked teams. And I just feel, I don't know if that, and I'm not calling for Ole Miss to lose this weekend. I'm just saying there are a couple games that you got to pay attention to. And I think, obviously Ohio State, Indiana is going to be big. If the conversation gets crazy, if Indiana beats Ohio State. And I think that's where the CFP committee has got to look at their Big Ten-ness, like the way I put that, and then figure out, okay, what do we do with the SEC? And then at the same time, how it would help them. And I'm not saying help the CFP, how it would help others if Army beats Notre Dame and we get something along those lines. So what I'm getting at is that just when you think everything was kind of kosher for the weekend, bam, we see some kind of craziness. And I expect that this weekend.
Yeah, if Army beats Notre Dame, that may be your path into the playoff, Tennessee.
Don't remember Heather Dinich last night on ESPN said that even if Notre Dame catches a second loss to Army, they shouldn't be out of it. So,
oh Lord,
yeah. I love this sport. I love it. I don't care. The fact that we're having this conversation right now and talking about 15 teams and not talking about just 7 teams, I think that's great. I think it adds the flavor to college football. I think it gets more people engaged, and I really enjoy it. I do.
Yeah.
I think we're going to 16 teams in 2 years. But at the same time, right now, I think that if we don't start getting some clear answers out of the CFP committee there in Grapevine, Texas, there's going to be riots around college campuses if a couple teams get left out that deserve it in this whole, strength of schedule and for, having amnesia for what happened in September, and early October is going to come back to bite them in the ass.
Well, Trey, I'm with you half the way on that. I love this. I think this is great for college football. I think it keeps interest. I think it keeps games meaningful later in the year. I think anybody that liked the 14 playoff over this, look at the evidence, and if you don't agree, then I just don't know what to tell you. I think this makes for a better product in so many ways. No, where I don't agree with you, I'm not here for the chaos that is prompted by lack of research and logical consistency. And I think that's what we've got. I think we both, I don't want to put, I think we both feel that way. So I didn't mean to put words in your mouth, but I think to me, there's already enough holes in the logic that there should be some serious questions asked about who makes the selections next year. What's do we, here's another thing I want to ask you. Have they released strength of schedules yet? Have they given their, all right, this is, see, that to me is a red flag. Tell us, all right, Texas's strength of schedule is 58, Alabama's is 2, whatever that number is. Why can we not be told? I don't understand that. And I've reached out to the people that run the thing, and I'm not trying to throw shade, but I'm wondering if, they are on orders from the committee to, hey, we need to embargo that information. To me, maybe it's out there and I just haven't seen it, but the lack of transparency in that too is problematic.
Well, we're going to be here next week talking about the same thing and probably going to have a couple other teams that are now in the picture. I think that's what's going to happen. I'm predicting it, and I look forward to it.
Well, thank you for joining us. You've given us more time than you. Tell folks what you'll be doing this weekend.
Yeah, covering college football and watching a little bit of basketball on the side. We got Maui Invitational going on. We got all these fun tournaments that happen right during the season. So I'm in basketball mode too. We'll get into the coverage part of it here in a couple of weeks. But yeah, so just look, we got a lot in store for this weekend, and then Thanksgiving week. Look forward to getting down to College Station for that big one. So you can follow me on X, whatever. It's Twitter at Trey Wallace _ follow all my work at Outkick.com. And man, as always, I love joining you and Chase, and look forward to doing it again next week.
We're rooting for a surprise Trey Wallace appearance, maybe in between, hopefully.
I think you'll get it.
We'll cross our fingers, say our prayers. Or Trey, thank you always for joining us. If people don't know, Trey and I are good friends in real life. He's been fantastic to the show, and always love having you on, my man.
You're kind of overselling the good friends in real life. I don't know. Maybe we should ask DC about
Maybe we need to have a conversation off camera that I don't know about. So
Still, I look forward to my Christmas gift, which is an Amazon box of juice boxes.
absolutely. Of course
Apple
it is.
juice,
You know
by the
me
way.
well.
I know.
All right.
Y'all keep it up, guys. I loved it. I had a great time.
All kidding aside, thanks to Trey, thanks to Chase. Chase and I got more football work to do because we're always doing football work here at the channel. We got previews of all the games this weekend involving FBS and involving SEC on SEC at least. So I hope you get that. Best way to do it, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. You've been watching Southeastern 16 presented by BetOnline.